Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
We are so excited to be going to Vermont. We are so excited to bring racers to Vermont and to bring more adventure racing to communities in Vermont. You know, we're working really hard right now to bring partners into the fold and to really highlight the local businesses, the local organizations, institutions across the course. So my hope and expectation is that racers will really be treated like guests and like family once they get up there.
Well, you know, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
All right, folks, here we go. Episode 113 being released on January 13th. 113 on 113. What a great date. Love when the numbers add up. Today we are bringing you Brent and Abby from Rootstock Racing. They have been guests on this show before. Always enjoy having them on. Always a good conversation. They are bringing back their Endless Mountains Adventure Race for a third edition this summer, 2025. Going to Vermont this time. And in this episode, we dig deep on their location choice, teamwork. There's beta in there for the course for those who are racing. And we are delighted that you are here. The Dark Zone is diving right into 2025 with a whole slate of episodes. And we are playing a bit of catch up as this was recorded back in the fall. But here it comes just in time to fuel your winter training. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of The Dark Zone. And always remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Imagine a world where young women in Afghanistan and Pakistan rise above societal constraints, embracing their strength and potential. Ascend Athletics is making this vision a reality. Through mountaineering-based leadership training, Ascend empowers girls and women aged 15 to 24 to become courageous leaders in their communities. By conquering physical summits, these young women build self-esteem and develop skills that last a lifetime. Operating since 2015 in Afghanistan, expanding to Pakistan in 2023, Ascend focuses on regions where gender inequality is most pronounced, providing tools for girls and women to lead empowered lives. Join the Dark Zone in supporting these brave young women as they climb towards a brighter future. Visit ascendathletics.org to learn more about and contribute to this transformative mission. And remember, Ascend pays nothing for the spot. We love the work that they do, and the Dark Zone is happy to support it.
Calling all adventure racers. The time has come to sign up for the Cerberus 3-Day Expedition Stage Race happening May 2nd through 4th, 2025 in the breathtaking Southwest Virginia mountains. This isn't just any race. It's 3 consecutive days, each packed with 10 to 12 hours of trekking, biking, and paddling. Whether you're a seasoned racer or a newcomer eager to dive in, Cerberus offers the perfect blend of challenge and camaraderie. Sanctioned by USARA and part of the AR World Series, your participation earns you points in both rankings. Plus, we got you covered with detailed topo maps, breakfast each morning around 5 a.m., dinner each evening when you finish around 7 p.m., and race-branded gear for those who register before March 1st, 2025. Enjoy free on-site camping or opt for a cozy cabin or nearby accommodations. And don't worry about the boats. We provide standard 2-seat canoes for each team. So assemble your team of 2 to 4 members and get ready for an unforgettable experience. Visit thecerberusrace.com to register and find all the details.
Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. It's your host, Brian Gatens. The returning guests, we love them. They're the best, right? Folks who've been on the show previously and have had a chance to talk about their races. Today, we welcome back Rootstock Racing. They've been on the show previously multiple times in different venues. They are bringing back the third edition of the Endless Mountains Adventure Race. The first 2 editions took place in Pennsylvania. Very successful, very popular, really kind of filling a multi-day opening in the Northeast of the United States. We've brought them back because they're going to talk about Endless Mountains 2025, which is shifting from Pennsylvania to Vermont. So Brent and Abby, welcome to the show. Always great to have you on the Dark Zone. When we get started here, talk to us first and foremost about the thinking behind going from Pennsylvania to Vermont. Why the new playground?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it wasn't necessarily in our original plans for Endless Mountains. You know, the name Endless Mountains comes from just east, actually, of the region in Pennsylvania, where we've developed the course or developed the race. We really saw this as a Pennsylvania race. And then a couple years ago, an organization reached out to us in another state, not Vermont. And we began to talk to them about hosting a race out there, and it kind of expanded our vision for what the event could be. And Vermont is a bit of a wish fulfillment race for us. We have flirted for the last number of years about moving up to New England ourselves. Brent is from Massachusetts. We have kind of a big and growing community up there. And it hasn't happened yet. But in the process of our being up there over the last couple of years of exploring some of those possibilities, we've really began to imagine the possibility of a race up there. And a big race, a multi-day race in endless mountains up there. And we talked to the other race directors in the area. We talked to Jimara, we talked to Strong Machine, and we talked to Grant Killian, who was the race director for Untamed New England, and really wanted to make sure that we were, not stepping on anybody's toes, but also that it would be a welcomed presence in New England, right? Because there hasn't been an expedition race in New England since 2018. And we got, I think, the blessing and the enthusiastic blessing of everybody who we chatted with. And we were kind of off and running at that point. First imagining what the course would be, and then being on the ground and doing the legwork. And now the course is one weekend away from being polished.
But that's actually pretty early. I mean, we're recording this. This is mid-September 2024. The race is June 2025. And so good on you for being that far ahead of the scouting, that far ahead of the curve. Clearly, there'll be work on the course between here and there. For the listeners at home, give me the dates of the race again.
June 21st is the start date. So, this is always the big question in our sport, right? How do you measure an event date? Is it the start to finish line, or is it the pre-race to post-race? The race itself, we're projecting to run Saturday, June 21st to the following Saturday, which I imagine is the 28th. Yeah. And so, we try with our first two editions, we really tried to keep the pre-race to a minimum in terms of asking people to take more time off than they already have to take off. This event is a little bit longer, right? This is a 7-day race. The first two editions of Endless were a 5-day race. So we recognize that this is a big sacrifice for a lot of folks. I do want to just add one more thing before we really focus entirely on Vermont. The original concept of Endless Mountains was to really showcase this region of Pennsylvania we have called the Pennsylvania Wilds. And so the idea was to design 4, perhaps 5 editions of a 5-day race to really explore all the corners of the PA Wilds. And so we've, at this point, done 2 of our kind of 4 or 5 editions, and we fully expect to and are excited about coming back. One of the reasons we ended up in Vermont was, as experienced racers ourselves, who have been around the sport for almost 2 decades, like, we know that, asking people to come back to the same event year after year after year, it's too much to ask. There's so many wonderful racing opportunities out there. A lot of them are expedition races, but, some folks are looking at doing other kinds of events as well, and they want to experience new things. If you're a multi-day racer, you may want to go try doing another Adventure Race World Series event in a different country. And so we kind of realized that, putting on 4 or 5 events straight in Pennsylvania might not actually be in our best interest, and it might not necessarily be in the community's best interest. So that's where we started to really think hard about going into some sort of rotation. And I don't know that we're going to draw a clear line on what that's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to now be an alternating rotation where it's, Pennsylvania, another state, Pennsylvania, another state, or maybe we'll do this one and then do the next 2 editions back in Pennsylvania. I don't know. But I think we were excited about the opportunity of branching out a bit and exploring some other parts of the country too. So here we are. And
I think that it's great. First off, having been involved in the first 2 editions of Endless Mountains and having tremendous hospitality all throughout Pennsylvania, it's nice to hear that your decision to go to Vermont is not as if you're done with Pennsylvania. You've kind of wrung what you can out of that and you're going someplace else. It sounds like a variety of things came together to bring you from the switch from Pennsylvania into Vermont, but then still the entire Northeast playground is existing out there. Because you invoked his name, I have to say something. Grant Killian from Untamed New England. I know you're out there. I know you're listening, Grant. My phone is open. Call me whenever you're ready to bring Untamed New England back. That being said, Rootstock races are known for the idea of a journey and the idea of the history. And you, in Pennsylvania, and all your races too, the ones we had in Maryland, and when you touch other states, there's this historical component that always goes along with your race experience. It's not just a race from point A to point B, but there's this idea of a journey. The name of the race is a play on the name Vermont. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So we like to name our events with a little subtitle that no one actually ends up using for the most part, but it's kind of a fun little thing we do. And we had a lot of conversations, and the logical starting point, of course, is the Green Mountains. I mean, I don't know that there would have been a more iconic or easy to recognize name than that. But we also felt like Endless Mountains, the Green Mountains, just didn't sound quite right. So we did some deep dive on history. And as we kind of explained in our announcement of the name, we ended up finding this anecdotal story. And I'll be honest, I think it is anecdotal. I think that there's a little bit of historical haze around the veracity of the story. But as the story goes, right, Samuel Champlain, right, the great French explorer, and I say great with the qualification that we're talking about 400-year-old history that's rife with controversy when it comes to identity politics and especially with connections to the indigenous people of America. Though the French had a much better reputation in general with how they interacted with the local people here in the Americas than the British and Spanish and others. So I'll just throw that out there too as a plug for the French. Anyway, it's still controversial, and we recognize that. We're fortunate to be able to put on these kinds of events. I think all of us are fortunate to really indulge in the amazing outdoor spaces we have in North America, considering the fact that there were people that lived on these lands a long time before and for much, much longer than we have been here ourselves. So with all of that, I think, said and recognized, Samuel Champlain came down into Vermont, right? And I think stepped foot, I believe, if I'm correct, stepped foot for the first time on Vermont territory on an island in Lake Champlain. And the story said that he recorded on a map the term le Verd Monts, right? The Green Mountains in French, of course. So we thought that was fitting and a nice kind of connection and nod to history.
Love that. Love the idea too. And just to name check him again, when we spoke to Grant on his episode, he talked about how he tried to integrate into his races the sense of a journey, history, that we're traveling across lands of other people. And if you listen to that episode, Rootstock's keeping of that ethic alive came out in that podcast. So thank you for doing that and for that explanation. And of course, doing that kind of airs a sense of history and a sense of mystery around all that is taking place, right? The idea of a journey. This being the third edition of the Endless Mountains and the idea of opening the race back up and putting a third edition on is interesting, because sometimes with races, people kind of get their fill of the race organizer, they get their fill of the race course, and people vote with their feet, right? And you don't necessarily see them going out to other races. They don't really turn to the same races. They tend to search out other parts to go and race. Talk to us a bit about the amount of racers you have sign up and the strategies you use to gauge interest, and then how many of those races are returning racers.
Yeah, so we took a bit of a different approach this year than we've done in the past. We decided over the summer to open a pre-registration, kind of, noting interest. So folks could sign up on a Google form, and then they would get 3 extra days to register before we opened the event widely. So this past Monday was Brent's birthday. That seemed like a nice opportunity to open that early registration window. We wanted to make sure, Expedition Oregon was running last week. We love those guys. We didn't want to, step on any toes, but also didn't we didn't want to draw interest away from them, but we also didn't think it served anybody to open registration while such an iconic event was going on. So we made sure to let Oregon kind of finish out and let the energy from that, glow for a little while. We opened pre-registration on Monday and had, by the end of pre-registration, which was 72 hours, we had something like 20 teams sign up, which we were pretty surprised by. When we got to the end of pre-registration of early registration in 2023, a week before early registration ended, we had 3 teams signed up, and we were like, oh my God, we're going to have to cancel the race. And then of course there was this wonderful flood in the 48 hours before the price went up.
And that was like, just to clarify, that was like registration had been open for like 3 months.
Oh yeah, that was like the last days of December, like right before New Year's. So we opened registration widely on Thursday at midnight. I think we're looking at Saturday morning now. So it's been 48 hours. And I think we have 24 or 25 teams total. So basically half of our field is full. And the thing that is so we're just so grateful for is that, so of those 25 teams, 16 of them, I believe, are teams that attended either one or both of the first Endless. And at least 1 or 2 of the others came to the 30-hour Endless Light last year and then are stepping into multi-day racing or expedition racing for the first time. So we're just our goal in building Endless Mountains, and one of our primary goals was really to create a family, right? To step up the 24-hour racing and create this kind of intimate community that came together every year, every 2 years, whatever, to journey with each other. And so many of those folks are coming back, and we're just so totally touched by that.
I love the democratic nature of that, right? That you ask people to make, because let's be honest, when you sign up for a week-long experience, right, June 21st or 28th, and then you probably arrive Thursday, you leave Sunday, right? So it's really 10 days of your life you're giving up for this. Huge, right? You have to use your resources to get there. You have to go through the logistics of getting your team together. You have to do the training. When a person signs up to do a race of any sort, and it gets exponentially harder as the race gets bigger, bigger, and bigger, the show of faith they have to have in the race director says something. Right? So clearly having this kind of experience and these people coming back says something. I just have a quick math in my head, and 2/3 of people who've raced in the past are returning, right? So that says something for that. But it also provides a challenge for the race director, because people return and they don't want to repeat experiences. And I know that you're going to Vermont, right? So it's a different terrain. People will not get maps where they've seen it before. And I understand that. But for the returning racer, what differences can they find in general between the Pennsylvania experience and the Vermont experience? And this is a little bit of beta for those who are racing, right? So pay close attention.
Yeah, it's going to be a different race, no question. The first obvious difference is it's 2 days longer. And on the surface, maybe that's just that's just days. That's not experiences. But those people that know expedition racing know that, there's a very different challenge that comes with being out for 7 days versus 5. Sleep strategy becomes infinitely more important. I mean, it already is important in 5 days, but it is more important in 7 days. And nutrition is a good point, right? Nutrition, you're exposed out there to the elements. This is summertime in New England. So there could be some pretty wide temperature swings. Spoiler alert, there will be some bugs on the course, I promise. So it's going to be, a real kind of outdoor wilderness experience in that way. Vermont is such, I've increasingly been coming to realize, through the coursework we've done, the scouting we've done, I think as Abby indicated earlier on in the recording, we're basically done with the course design. We expect that there will be some changes that we have to make as we continue to work on the permits, which we've been, deep in the process now for, 6 to 8 months, but we, I think, still have a ways to go on that. So I expect we'll have to change some things. But the more time I've spent on the ground in Vermont, the more I feel like this race is kind of like an ode to the state. I hesitate to use the word love letter, but in a cheesy kind of way, that's almost what it feels like we're designing at this point. Vermont, for people that know it, It's magical. People just absolutely fall in love with this state. For those folks that maybe haven't spent much time in Vermont or haven't visited at all, I think if you find your way up and join us next summer, like, you will come to realize what everyone else has, that Vermont is a very special corner of our country. It's not going to actually be as, I'd say, remote as our first two editions of our race was. The PA Wilds is a surprisingly raw, remote, isolated area of the eastern seaboard. I wouldn't say that's Vermont. Vermont is beautiful. There are a lot of amazing outdoor experiences and opportunities to be had, but it doesn't have those huge tracts of outdoor space. And, it's bracketed by states like that, New York with the Adirondacks and New Hampshire with the Whites that offer those experiences. Vermont's a little different. So the race is going to have a really, I think, different feel to it. I think it will still absolutely offer some of the things folks are expecting. For example, will you be, deep in the woods bushwhacking and dealing with kind of off trail navigation? Absolutely. But you're also going to get some of that really iconic, back road Vermont gravel riding that so many people go up for. And there's also some really amazing mountain biking throughout the state. Vermont just, pound for pound, has some of the best mountain biking networks out there. There's just these amazing little 5, 10, 15, 20 or bigger mile mountain bike tracks literally in every corner of the state. It seems like every town or community has one.
Well, and they're not just like trails that can be used for mountain biking. They're graded trails. They're with beautiful maps of, the named loop-de-loops and this. Like, think about the Kingdom Trails are Vermont's iconic mountain bike, 100 miles of machine-built single track. Very small pockets of that exist all over the state. I've just been wowed by the things we're able to string together in this race, and having gotten to ride some of it, like, it is fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun riding.
Yeah, and I think they're going to get a lot of that. I think about one of my favorite races every year is the Maine Summer Adventure Race, and there's a lot of things I like about that race. But one of my favorite things is, some of their events. I think every year it's a different flavor, but some of my favorite events that they've put on are the ones that are really truly along the coast. And you get out there on bike and you're cruising through these little coastal villages, and you just get that little connection to the local community. And I think Vermont will have that vibe. Like, you're actually in 7 days, they're not going to pass through many like big towns with a lot of services, but they are going to pass through a lot of these little villages, right? Where, people are, connected to the land around them. And I think it's just going to be a really kind of beautiful, beautiful journey. I'll also add one more thing. One of the things, and one of the other reasons we have decided to really branch out from Pennsylvania is, as much as we love it, and as much as I think it's an amazing playground for what we do, I always do wonder, like, at what point do you say, all right, I've had enough time in the Pennsylvania woods, right? They all kind of look the same. It's the green tunnel, as they describe the AT. This course is going to feel pretty diverse, I think. There is some nice diversity to not just the experiences, but also the scenery. And Vermont has some really uniquely different ecosystems and such throughout the state. So, yeah.
Yeah. I had the opportunity last October, myself and two of my friends had a chance to ride Vermont on gravel bikes from the southern border to the northern border. Did it in roughly 2.5 days, 300 plus miles. And I agree with you that that one thing that Vermont offers, and this is not in contrast to any other states, but this is Vermont as a specific, their culture, their identity is the village culture. Right, that you'll pop out of the woods and there'll be a village, and there'll be a coffee shop there, and there'll be something there for you to go enjoy yourself.
There'll be soft serve. There'll be the creamies.
There'll be the creamies, right? And so people will gain weight during the race, which is nothing wrong with that. And then the other part of it too is that Vermont has a really deeply ingrained outdoor culture, where when people pass through, when the residents hear about a race coming through, they're like, oh, okay. Like the Green Mountain Stage Race is an iconic 4-day bicycle race that they have. The Vermont XL that Ted King has done on gravel bikes. Like, there's all of this culture and terrain. And so when you insert a race of this size into Vermont, simultaneously, they will be excited to have you, and they'll be like, oh, okay, people come here to race, right? So those two things will exist in parallel. I do want to swing back a bit with the idea of the disciplines that'll be in the race, right? And as we all know, there's only so many things that race directors will say about the race in advance of the race, because finding out before the race, the course and the maps is part of the experience of adventure racing. But can you touch upon the paddling? Can you touch upon the cycling? Can you touch upon like what disciplines are you definitely going to be touching on, and which ones should people kind of, people will be listening to this and they'll be considering getting ready for the race. And we always worry about a skills gap. Like, will I be able to do this thing that comes up? And of course, it being October, the race being in June, there's time to prepare for that. I'm thinking of ropes, all that kind of stuff. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So, I'll answer the question. I just, a real quick plug, right? That, Abby already alluded to this. It's been fun looking at who's been signing up. We have, again, about literally half the field is essentially filled. I think we're at 24 technically instead of 25. I think there's, I've done some online sleuthing for some of the individual people that have signed up on the teams we don't know. And I'm finding some folks that look like they may be literally jumping into the deep end, right? Like, I'm not sure they've done much, maybe even up to 24 hours, and they're just going for it. And I love that.
That's the greatest. Right away, favorite teams, go for it.
And, we want that, right? Like, that's one of our goals with Endless, is to offer people kind of an onboarding ramp for the rest of the Adventure Racing World Series. If you look at what Ben does with their amazing event out in Oregon, like, it is a much more technically proficient race, right? Like, that's probably not the ideal race to start with. I'm not saying you can't or even succeed at it, but man, it's much harder to succeed in an event like that. Right. And it might be some others. Now, I also don't want to undersell Endless. I think people that have done Endless know that, if you're going out there and you're trying to do the whole thing, like, it's no joke. Like, it's a challenging event, for sure. So it's one of the things we love about it. We're really trying to reach out and offer something to everybody. And I think we've been pretty successful in doing that. I think that we are at 24. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get any more teams signing up. Like, you never know. Right. You take what you get. This is wonderful. It's been an amazing start. We are aware of a whole host of other folks that are thinking about and probably planning on signing up. And so if anyone's listening to this and they're new and they're really on the fence, I would just say, don't be scared to take that leap. In terms of the actual skills, right? Of course, the core disciplines are crucial, right? Trekking, mountain biking, and paddling. It's Vermont. It's a big course. The course is probably going to be a bit bike heavy compared to some races, partly just because of the sheer size of it and what we're trying to achieve. And then also a bit just what Vermont has to offer. I think it lends itself to biking. So definitely like working on your bike skills and your bike endurance, I think is going to be crucial. Trekking, off-trail navigation will be definitely a big part of it, though, as we always do. There's usually a much friendlier kind of short course route through the trekking legs that will allow less experienced teams to stay more on trail. But working on your navigation is always an important skill. We include a lot of navigation in our events, so that will not change. Paddling is, the big one, and we've received a bunch of questions about this. Right now, the plan and intention is to have both pack rafting and more traditional paddling. We are working hard on trying to figure out boats. Boats are not easy. Boats have become an incredibly challenging thing to source for an event like this. And I think, I don't know, I think the days of having, boat fleets where you can get 200 boats that are all effectively the same are gone. So we're not sure where we're going to end up. We've been intending to have kayaks in the event. There's a chance we could end up with canoes. I think whatever we end up with, it'll be a blend of things, but to be determined. But there'll definitely be some river paddling. It's fun. It's splashy. I've scouted it all. One of the big questions we were asking is, are we going to have to dark zone anybody? And I think we've determined we don't have to. I think that will be a bit of a, teams making good decisions on their own. But the water levels are such, or the water, I guess, challenge is enough that we think that, we can let people go at night and just give them kind of the information they need to make good decisions.
With bigger rapids marked on maps.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna mark everything on maps, but even frankly, the bigger rapids, a competent team could run them at any point. So it's fun paddling. It's nothing that people need to be, I think, intimidated by. I do think, if we don't have this on the website quite yet, we will be updating it. It's always a good idea to do your training, right? So, taking river reading type course, moving water, swift water type courses, that sort of thing would be a good idea. But I also think, by adventure racing standards and norms, I think we ultimately ruled that we don't think it's something that we have to necessarily require certifications. We do require a wilderness first aid, backcountry medicine certification. At least someone on the team has to have that. It's a weekend-long course. I personally am a huge advocate for WFR or the woofer. If it was me, I would require that, but I recognize that we'd only have 5 teams because most people can't sacrifice 8 or 9 days of time to take that course. But I'm a huge proponent of wilderness first aid training in our sport. I wish more races would actually require that of people. We are sending people out on their own into the woods. Anything can happen. Everything does happen. And having someone on the team who at least has a base level of knowledge to deal with immediate issues could really make a huge difference. And knock on wood, it never does, come into play that we have to deal with that. But still, I just think it's a requirement. So
I think also too, when you have that kind of certification on a team, and you know that they're going out there with a higher level of experience, it gives you more latitude in the complexity and challenge of the course.
Yes.
Right? Because we speak of adventure racing, there's different levels of racing, right? And I think all race directors try to avoid the meat grinder, right? We don't want to take these newer racers and have them give up all this time, all this effort, and they just get destroyed on the course, and they're knocked out early, and they go home, and it's just. If a team disintegrates, you don't want to be the person that pours fuel on that fire. Sometimes team dynamics just don't work out, and no race strategy can control for that. And so there's always this balance between having a challenging course that is appropriately, it's not overly safe, but there's a level of safety that the race director could sleep at night knowing that they're not doing this to people. And having teams leave the start line knowing that they are well situated to care for themselves in the event of a crisis makes it easier to plan a course and to expand that course even more. Walk us through your internal conversations around that. And the reason I ask the question is there are people at home listening right now who do want to level up. And I think most people don't level up for 2 reasons. A, they think they won't finish the race, or B, they're going to get hurt. But those are the 2 things that kind of exist. Talk a bit about the physical challenge part of the race. What can people expect?
Yeah, I mean, Vermont is the Green Mountain State, right? It is mountainous. It is, it's not a flat course. There's definitely, they can expect significant elevation across the course. It's not as severe, as Brent said, as the Adirondacks to the west or the Whites to the east. And I don't mean severe in a bad way, but those are like striking, like very intense mountain experiences. Vermont is gentler. And I use that word, like that word to me is kind of epitomizes Vermont, but it's also not only what people are going to experience on the course, right? The Long Trail, for example, is notorious for its rocks and roots, its technicality. Racers will not be on the Long Trail. The Long Trail is not permittable. But that is kind of the complexion of what they can see on the course. So it is a New England wilderness experience, right? There will be rocks, there will be roots, there will be old growth trees, there will be dense forests, there will be gravel, there will be smooth single track and rocky single track. Like it is kind of everything you might think of when you think of New England. And I know not everybody in the world has a frame of reference for New England. For those of us in the US, I think there is kind of an archetype of New England, and we've tried to include all of that in the race. The water this year, I think, is this was the part that we were the most uncertain about. In Pennsylvania, the water conditions are so dependent on rain. And I think Vermont, there's a little bit more certainty of what we'll expect. So rain will certainly impact water levels, but like these are waterways that we can run regardless of, historic droughts notwithstanding. We can run these waterways. We feel confident about them. Brent is crossing his fingers here. There's also some things that are a little bit unique to New England in the course. And we're not going to give those away necessarily. They won't require specific skill sets. Grant used the word at some point, transportation experiences. And there may be a few of those encountered on the course as well. There's no rock climbing this year. There's no climbing skills levels that people need to reach, nor climbing gear. There's certainly going to be, the typical scrambling and, kind of boulder challenges. I don't mean boulder challenges as in a specific section, just, the woods in New England.
It's Vermont. It's going to be, you're going to be climbing up and over things that you're not wearing a helmet and a rope, but you're going to be working. Like that's what you're saying there. And yeah. I do like when you talk about the course itself, how you talked about the rocky, rooty, and technical nature of Vermont, because that's one piece of advice. Having done some time up there, I would encourage teams to make certain your feet are sorted, right? Your feet are always your enemy, right? And know how to take care of your feet, know how to change your socks and foot lube and things like that, because for as much cycling as teams are going to do, and Vermont is just a cycling heaven, there's no doubt that when they're off that's going to be a challenge to get ready for. So for those getting ready, get a pack on, get in the woods and get those feet toughened up. I agree with that. Brent, What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a couple, those that have done Endless before, if you do your research, like in both of our first two races, we had these monster treks right in the middle of the race, right? I think 40 plus, I think they were both about 50 miles. I think the second one was a little bit shorter, maybe like 40 to 45, but we don't have anything quite that big planned. There's a chance one of our treks could maybe expand a bit to head in that direction. But, there's a good 30 plus mile trek and another one that's probably in the 25 to 30 mile range. So, and there'll be some kind of micro foot as we like to do. And I think that will be something folks see, that there's, a couple of stages where they'll get those like micro embedded sections that we like to throw at them. We are thinking of, paying a little bit of homage to Untamed New England with some sort of orienteering navigation based relay where, everyone on the team will have an opportunity to go out somehow, some way, and do a little navigation on their own.
And we'll share more details about the disciplines for that. So folks can, prepare navigationally. We want to make sure everybody on the team feels confident going into that.
I think that was called was that the Pizza Paradise in 2018, New England? I figured that was the ski resort, or Pancake Paradise.
Pancake Paradise.
So Abby said something that I'll just throw out there as a teaser, and with a clear, like, don't worry about it. If we do this, like, we will give you a lot of notice. There's this place that I found out in the depths of Vermont that no one knows about, apparently. Like I've asked, the folks at the Green Mountain Adventure Racing Association about this place, and it was news to them. I found this place, and man, if you could put a couple ropes up at this place.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Now there's it doesn't exist. This place basically doesn't exist. And so, but it's been in the back of my head. And I just, I think I would need to make contact with somebody locally to figure out, what would go into being able to access this site. Is it even accessible? And then who might we work with to support such a site? So I think it's probably a long shot that it makes it into the race. And if it doesn't, as Abby said, we don't have plans this year to have any kind of ropes or climbing sections, but there's a chance.
But you never know. I like the fact that there's someone home listening right now who wrote on their notes, "No climbing." Yeah, and is now like crossing it out and putting a question mark next to it.
You never know. But again, like, just to make this clear, like we take all this really seriously in that, this is not something we would spring on you in May or April. Like, this would be the kind of thing where over the next month or so, I try to get more information about this site and figure out if it might be usable. And then we update folks, well before New Year's, probably that we would include it. And as we often do with all of these things, we recognize that not every team is up for all of those more technical challenges. And there would be ways to bypass that challenge. So, yeah.
So I do want to get into the logistics of the race, about race site location, all that, and we'll get to there in a second. But I want to broaden the conversation a bit wider here. Being adventure racers yourselves, having done these types of races and having seen these types of races take place, talk about the teams that do well, the teams that leave feeling satisfied, the teams that feel like they've done their best. What dynamics do those teammates share that when people think about Endless Mountain, they think about expedition adventure racing, that they have in their head going into the race? Teamwork and success. What has been your experience?
That's such a good question. I think one of the things we have talked about with the teams that come to Endless, and I think this would be true across the board, the teams that have the best experience are the ones that, this sounds so trite, but I think it's actually so profound, like make good decisions, right? At Endless, that means knowing when to skip a checkpoint, knowing when to short course yourself, and getting to the end of that section in reasonable time so that they can take on the next section. At a race like Expedition Africa, which we just competed in Namibia in May, that means knowing to sleep when the sun is at its hottest because it's not safe for your team to go through, or knowing to carry extra water because, you're crossing the desert. Or knowing that you have X number of days to complete this race longer than the first place teams because every single checkpoint is mandatory. And so you have to wrap your head around the fact that there is no, official short coursing. Making those good decisions and having a plan for those decisions in advance. We're going to spend this amount of time to get to this point. And if it takes us longer, these are the things that we're going to skip later on, or these are the decisions we're going to make later on. I don't think a team necessarily all needs to come with the same skill set. And I think that there's a misconception that if everybody's on the same page physically or technically, everybody moves as one. I was just talking to some of our teammates who are racing national. We have 2 teams going to nationals. One of them is an all women's team. And I was talking to our teammate, Karen, and she was like, yeah, one teammate is just like a monster on bike. So she can carry everything on the bike. And then Karen is incredibly strong on foot. So she can be the one kind of pulling everybody. And then the third teammate is a monster physically, but is also the navigator. And she's going to keep everyone moving in the right direction. And I think just making sure that the skills are complementary and that teams talk in advance about who's going to do what and how they are going to respond to particular disciplines or how they're going to strategize around particular sets of problem solving. Those are the things that make for a good team experience. It's the kind of magic sauce of teams that you don't talk about enough. It's the communication and conversations and knowing each other's ticks.
It's the idea that everybody, it helps the team if everybody is strong, but you don't need to be strong in the same way. And therefore you work off each other. And that's a huge thing to point out, right? It's not just the 4 most physically strong people who will always do well in a race. Other things will always play a role there. And I think it's good for you to point that out because very often people will not jump into adventure racing in any distance because they think that they're not strong enough. And while strength is important, it's important to also be able to work with your teammates and have other skill sets that you could apply during a race. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Well, and to what you just said, the trust piece, right, is paramount. The trust in your teammates to navigate those decisions with each other and to kind of work as a whole. I think trust is perhaps the most underappreciated or unspoken and important part of team dynamics.
Brent, what do you think?
Your question makes me think of some conversations we had this past weekend. We did an 8-hour race with our 10-year-old daughter, Zoe. And one of the things I was talking to her about during the race is it's a hard thing to figure out, I think, and really fully embrace, but realizing that when you do this sport, right, you really have to put aside the notion of being an individual athlete. And on one level, that's kind of counterintuitive. We all have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our gear, our bikes. We have to take care of our nutrition. We have to advocate for ourselves when we need to deal with a foot issue or whatever it might be. So there's absolutely an individual component to our sport. But I think what determines success in our sport is, can your team really truly set aside the individual and embrace the fact that you're basically one organism moving through the course. And, if your goal is to do the best you can, and that's really different for so many teams. For some teams, for a handful of teams, that really is about like, what's the number next to your team name on the final rankings. For most teams, it's about, how much of the course can I actually accomplish? How close to full course can I get? Right. And for a number of teams, it's like, I don't care. Like, I know I'm not going to be anywhere close to full course. I'm going to skip a bunch of points. I'm going to be short coursed within the first 6 hours of a 7-day race. But, my goal is to get to that finish line within 7 days, right? And I think to be able to really achieve those goals, the best teams, regardless of their experience, realize that it's about working as one. And, when people are hurting or people are scared, they realize that they have to put some of that aside for the rest of the team to be able to achieve their goals. It's when you are feeling low and you're feeling, kind of angry and guilty and ashamed and whatever other negative feelings you're feeling about the fact that you're not where you want to be, that you accept your teammates' help and that it isn't a sign of weakness, right? It's about realizing that maybe your mind's not in it and you need to give up the maps to somebody else on the team. And I think the teams that everyone on the team is on board with that concept and they're really willing to put aside the individual, they're the teams that are going to be the most successful, whatever the end goal actually is for them.
Gotcha. Well, as the corollary to that, right? The folks that are able to navigate the smoothest in a particular moment, the folks that are feeling the most physically strong, for them to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. Brent said it so well to Zoe this weekend. If one of us ends the race feeling torn to shreds and the other two end the race like hooping and hollering and like jumping up and down, we didn't succeed, right? You want to try to find that calculus where everybody is putting out a relative effort that is consistent across the team. And for some folks, that may mean carrying extra weight, and for others, that may mean being towed. But the heart rate, for lack of a better measurement, is kind of on equal footing. And so everybody gets to the next TA needing kind of the same amount of replenishment, sleep, whatever. And that's never going to happen everywhere across the course. But the more you can equalize that, the better you will get to the end, all in that same relative orbit.
Yeah, that's sage advice there. I love adventure racing for a variety of reasons, but one reason why I love it is it's a peek into human nature, right? It's this completely concentrated experience for everyone to have. And one thing I pay attention in TAs and I pay attention during races, and it's always bothersome to see a team come into a TA and you can tell something's not right with the team, where like they're not really looking at each other and someone is kind of more blown than the other. And you really hope for that team to work through those issues and work through those things together because you want them to have a good experience. And I always like to say in adventure racing, you see every human dynamic passes through. Like everybody goes through something, every emotion is felt. And to your point, when the team brings themselves together and they sort of work through that, it's a great thing to see. And I appreciate that. And I think for the teams that are growing in the sport, your advice is well taken. And I think it's a good thing for them to hear. Let's talk logistics a little bit about the Endless Mountains, because as we all know, the hardest part of getting to a race is getting to the start line, right? Getting your gear and your travel, your logistics, your transportation. And race directors do their best to make it easy for racers as possible to get to that start line. Walk us a bit through your logistics. What's the home city? Are you working with a college or university? Where would people fly into? You mentioned the 21st to the 28th. Do they come in Thursday? Do they leave Sunday? Like wrap a blanket around the race up. Put the race over here and walk us through all those logistics of getting to and from.
Yeah, so the closest major city and the closest major airport are Burlington, Vermont, which is the biggest city in Vermont. It's about 2 hours from Montreal, 3-ish hours from Boston. So there's major international access to this race. Our first two Endless Mountains were a bear to organize teams getting to and from the airport.
Pittsburgh back and forth.
Well, yeah. and last year it was 3 hours to the closest. Right. 2023 it was 3 hours to the closest airport. This is 3 miles. We are like counting our lucky stars. Yeah. Burlington is an amazing city. There's all the kind of, big box stores that you could need, but there's also a thriving downtown, wonderful restaurants, great breweries, parks, and, it's just a really, really wonderful city. The host location is the headquarters are at St. Michael's College, which is in Colchester, Vermont, which is just adjacent to Burlington, literally 3 miles from the airport. And St. Mike's is very similar to where we hosted the event the last 2 years. We were at Clarion University Penn West now is what it's called. It's changed its name. And then Lycoming College. And we have found the college campus setting to work incredibly well for Endless. So as with the first 2 editions, teams will get a night before the race and a night after the race as part of their fee. So we are including the Friday night before and the Saturday night after in the entry fee. And then they have the opportunity, if they'd like, to add on an additional night before the race. So Thursday night, or if they, think they're going to finish early, they can add the Friday night before the finish line closes. And then they can leave all of their stuff in the dorms for the entire duration of the race. This is actually the thing that ultimately made us choose St. Mike's instead of the other schools in the area, because that is just such a nice thing for racers not to have to worry about packing up, not to have to worry about schlepping. They can just leave everything in their rooms. We'll take their keys and they'll get them back at the finish line. They can leave their cars on site. All of the events will take place on St. Mike's. All the pre-race events will take place on St. Mike's campus. We are anticipating, we're still figuring out the finish line, whether it's going to be at St. Mike's or somewhere else, and that they will be transported back. And they probably won't know that until they see the maps. The post-race party will be at one of the many, many, many breweries in Burlington or adjacent communities, Winooski, Colchester. So everything is really going to be within a 3-mile radius. We could not ask for a better host city than Burlington.
Yeah, they're built for this, right? Easily accessible, right there, 3 miles away, and just the whole. And I think it's worth pointing out that you have the connection of the challenge of Vermont and all that it offers, combined with the ease of getting back and forth, just makes it so much easier. Like, we've all gone to races where it's an adventure. Just getting to the start line is brutal. And the trains and planes and automobiles and misconnections and canceled trains and all of that. So there's something to be said for that. So the Adventure Racing World Series is a worldwide collection of races under the leadership of Heidi Muller. She's the CEO. All across America, North America, there's various races that are going on. But I think this year, Endless Mountains has a pretty unique spot as one of the sole expedition races being held in North America. Walk us through where you kind of fall with that.
Yeah, so there's 4 ARWS qualifying events in the North American, in Canada, the US, and Mexico. 4, am I doing the math right? I think there's 5. So Endless Mountains is one of them. Expedition Oregon, Ozark, La Ruta Madre, and Expedition Canada. Great constellation of races. All of these races offer something different. There's also a growing stage race scene, actually mostly in Canada at this point, though I think we will start to see some emerging in the US too. So I apologize. I don't know the name of, it's a French name of the one in Eastern Canada. A wonderful event, kind of hit all of the marks, including inviting local schools to participate. Like, such a beautiful event to follow this year. The other one is Natalie Long's Raid the Rockies, part of her Adventure Immersion Lab, which I think this was the first event this year. It looked like a huge success. Unfortunately, it's running the week after Endless. Otherwise, I was hoping to go out for it this year, but I think I'll be a little sleep deprived by the time we get there. So this upcoming year in 2025, the World Championship, it's great for North America, is being held in Canada. It's in North America for the first time since, I think, 2017, when Mark Harris did it as Adventure Enablers. So all of the qualifying events will be channeling teams to British Columbia, to Penticton, Canada, and Endless Mountains is the only US-based qualifier in 2025. So La Ruta is running as one of the qualifiers in Mexico, and then you have Endless. And then, so there will be, I think, a number of North American teams looking to those 2 events as ways to get up to Canada.
Yeah, it's really, when I look back to the 2022 version of Endless Mountains, I felt like it really kicked off the North American multi-day expedition race where you worked alongside Canada, worked alongside Bend Racing to get it all together. And now we're seeing the outgrowth of that where more and more of the sport grows. And one thing that's not surprising is if you look at all the metrics that guide the sport is growing, right? At every single level. We're seeing multi-day races that are going on, still very popular in Europe. We had the World Champs in Africa last year. We're seeing a lot of regional races, smaller races. And so it's great that Endless Mountains has played its role between the race itself and carrying everything forward and helping the sport grow along the way. I do want to let you go to begin your busy day today. Is there anything that I didn't ask about Endless Mountains? Anything I didn't say that you want to circle back on? Any thoughts that you want to finish up on? Anything you want to say to prospective racers?
We are so excited to be going to Vermont. We are so excited to bring racers to Vermont and to bring more adventure racing to communities in Vermont. You know, we're working really hard right now to bring partners into the fold and to really highlight the local businesses, the local organizations, institutions across the course. So my hope and expectation is that racers will really be treated like guests and like family once they get up there. And we're so excited to get to the start line, which is on the summer solstice. So the longest day of the year will kick off the race.
All right, folks, thanks for being a listener. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Brent and Abby. Like I said, always a good chat, always a good talk. Hopefully you might want to consider giving the Endless Mountains a go or any adventure race in your backyard. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being a listener. Remember, you keep racing, we'll keep talking.